the Wildlife Observer Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the On the Wing Tours podcast. We are the podcast for nature travel nuts, and we're coming at you from the headquarters of the Wildlife Observer Network. I am Angie Fredrickson, and I am with my brilliant husband, Tony Croasdale, who is the genius behind this venture, and I will introduce him now. Hi, honey.
Hello, darling. Hello, listeners.
So this is our first podcast for On the Wing Tours. Very exciting. Why don't you talk a little bit about On the Wing and the Wildlife Observer Network and all that jazz?
Yes, so originally, my partner in the podcast, not in life,
Hello.
Billy Brown and I started a podcast called the Urban Wildlife Podcast, which we've been doing for about 5 years.
Holy cow.
And we decided that we want to expand our content. We want to talk about all things wildlife.
That's right.
Not just within cities. It's kind of funny, we started the podcast very niche.
Yeah.
And so we're branching out, and we're bringing a lot more people into it.
Absolutely.
And we thought this would be fun to, since I love nature travel, so does my wife, hence we're married.
Yes.
And actually we have a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, Kim Bay, who will be my primary host for this, a co-host for this, as well as Angie.
Yeah.
Who is very extensively traveled. And I think she would bring a different perspective than I, because I've traveled often for field research and done like bare bones birding with friends.
Yeah.
All over the world, where I'll camp, I might be, in a float plane for research.
Sleeping in the van.
Yeah. While Kim has access to some resources that I do not, and she's able to stay in accommodations that are a bit more upscale than I do. Mm-hmm. And so I think between the two of us, we bring a really pretty much full spectrum of ways you can stay. And Angie is my companion for a lot of this.
Yeah. And
we're also involved in a venture, to be transparent. So we have an offshoot of my sister and husband's travel agency. They do Mayfair Travel. So we're starting a nature-focused subsidiary called On the Wing. And we are going to offer, wildlife-focused travel agency services as well as some tours. But on this podcast, we will be talking with other tour operators. We're not going to...
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be talking to my friends and people I know who, work for all the big birding tour companies around the world, and we'll talk to them about what they have to offer. This isn't about us. If you hear about us and want to, book a tour, certainly. But, we want to... what's the saying about rising tides raises all boats?
That's right.
And, one of the goals of On the Wing is to provide services for people who might not be able to afford these large tours. And one of the things that we do is there are larger tour companies, and we will, we'll buy their tours and fill it for all clients. People might be like, why don't I just go on their tour directly? And because, we might have a bit of a, slight markup, but it'd still be much cheaper than other big tours. Well, the thing what we offer is we take advantage of the economy of scale that these big providers have to offer, and then we get the tour group together so it's of like minds. Now, yeah, if you can spend 2 or 3 times as much and go on a country, go on similar itineraries with the big birding tour companies, and they're great. Don't get me wrong, but if you were to go on your own on one of these larger tour companies, you're not going to be with other birders. They're not going to. A lot of the clientele aren't going to even have binoculars. You're going to stop and you're going to be seeing all these small songbirds that you want to get a look at, and you're not going to be able to do that. So the idea is if we can pack these tours full of like-minded people, we can get take advantage of the savings economy scale and have people of like minds there.
Yeah, right, exactly. So Tone and I started traveling together in 2018, or I guess 2019. We got married in 2018, and we have kind of firsthand experience of what it's like to go on a tour, go on an African safari, with people who are not necessarily birders. And, you can get a lot out of it. But what we realized is if you're with other people who are great birders too, or just huge nature enthusiasts, then, you can kind of, you can get a little more out of it because you have other eyes and other brains. Yeah.
And I've done tours, I've done trips to on my own to Brazil and Belize and Northern Australia, and I've done it with other birders on our own, and we get similar numbers of birds or identical numbers of birds to these big tour companies, but we're also very experienced naturalists ourselves, and we might find some local guides. So, that is something, a perspective I can offer as well. And one of the things, too, is just general travel agent services. Like, you're not gonna go on a package tour. You're gonna arrive and kind of be on your own. But we can line up lodges to find you, and hook you up with local guides and use our expertise. And I've traveled on the cheap and seen pretty much everything I wanted to see on my own, and we can provide you that expertise as well. And also the other thing is, if your family's doing a tour, doing a trip, and your primary focus isn't birding, we can find you. If you're a birder and you want to take your family somewhere cool, but you don't, want to make it just about birding, we can still get you a bunch of birds on the way too. We'll figure that out. That's another thing we'll offer. But we figured this is a great way to bring what we do to the masses, but also just talk about ecotourism and nature travel.
Yeah. So we hope to share our experiences and also just inspire everybody who's listening, and just build a community. So
absolutely. One of the things, we want to, a lot of it we'll be talking about our own travel, but we're going to be interviewing other tour operators, other tour guides, but also I want to do a lot of interviewing of the local guides themselves in these countries.
Yeah.
And one of the things too is like, you can book with just them sometimes.
Absolutely.
And they, unfortunately, often, by the time how these big tour companies operate is a birding tour company, you have to pay for their staff, their back end, their staff that goes with it. But then you also have to pay for the logistical company in country. And then they themselves hire the lodges, and then they themselves hire off of local guides. So by the time the money gets to the local guide, it's not that much. And in a lot of these local guides in these countries, you can actually book with them directly, and they'll book you. It might be cheaper for you, and they'll get more money themselves.
Yeah.
So they can book the vehicles, they can book the lodges.
Yeah. And
you cut out a lot of the middlemen. And hey, everybody needs to make some money, but ultimately, it'd be nice is. I work in kind of a nature guide for a living at one particular park, but it's a shame that my colleagues in other countries often don't have the ability to come and travel like I do. And I make a modest income and I'm able to see the world. And people who do my job in other countries often cannot. We can't reciprocate. So at least we can give them a voice and maybe try to get them. Raise their incomes by getting some business to them directly.
Totally. And for those of you who have not met my husband yet, and I will introduce him in just a moment, Tony makes friends everywhere he goes. He is one of the friendliest, most warm-hearted, most genuinely enthusiastic people and most passionate nature guy that I have ever met. And so everywhere we travel, Tony makes friends, genuine friends with the local guides. And so we'll be able to bring that expertise along as well. So I'm going to introduce my husband. Tony, you're a rare bird. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your lifetime of passion for nature.
All right, baby. So I'm actually keep my employment vague for safety reasons.
Do it.
Sometimes it's my duty to make sure that my opinions are my own and not for the agency I work for. So,
just a moment, guys.
And we're back.
Hello. Tone, do you want to explain to our listeners what just happened?
Yeah, so we're not in the studio. The Urban Wildlife Podcast now, Wildlife Observer Network studio. We are in the upstairs because the basement is too cold for my wife.
That's right. So Tony was cooking chicken and our kitchen oven alarm went off. So anyway, it was a great chance to pivot, right? Because you were introducing yourself. I can just do it if you're insecure, honey.
No, I'm good, babe.
Okay.
I can talk about myself.
Right,
so yeah, so I work in municipal government, and I am the director of an environmental center. And that's all I'm going to say about my day job. I also am an adjunct professor in botany and ecology. My history is I grew up in Philadelphia. I got into birding since I was 9 years old. But then in my teenage years, I got into punk rock. I traveled the world in a band, birded all over the world, like literally Australia, Asia, Europe, and went back to school after a 14-year rock and roll vacation. And now I did some field research in Alaska and in northern Canada, in Canadian Arctic, and as well as Brazil, a little bit formerly in Peru, and went back to school and have been working in environmental centers and as a consultant, wildlife biology consultant, doing some various things, but now I'm gainfully employed.
But baby, you're a baller birder. That's the point. Oh
yeah, so and I led a tour to Brazil, although my guiding days got curtailed by me going back to grad school, and then unfortunately, the company I worked for was owned by this lovely man, Terry Colburn, who his health deteriorated and he actually died last year. So that was a real shame. And yeah, and I participate in the World Series of Birding every year. And I am a very avid birder.
Yes, a very, very, very talented birder. And I am Tony's wife. I'm Angie Fredrickson. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about me, honey?
It sounds like you want me to.
I feel awkward talking about myself all of a sudden.
Right. So my wife is wonderful and brilliant. She's currently with child, which is very exciting for us.
Yes, that's true.
Expecting in the end of June.
Yes.
So my wife did modern dance. She had a career. She was into dance, and then due to injury, she switched gears and became started work. Went to school for ocean coastal policy for grad school. Worked at the port of Long Beach, the port of Seattle. Now she's a maritime attorney.
Forget it. I have an environmental background, and I like to travel, but I didn't travel very much for many years because I was always in school or working, and then I met my husband who has a serious wanderlust bug, and so international travel began again. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about our first, it's not our first trip together, but I think we wanted to kick off the podcast talking about, I guess, our pilot trip for On the Wing Tours, which was...
to Ecuador.
Yes, to Ecuador and the Galapagos.
Very
exciting.
Yeah, so this is what the podcast will mostly be about.
Yes.
Not just interest to ourselves. Yeah, so our first trip we actually, for sort of our honeymoon, a little bit later honeymoon, we went to Kenya. Yeah. We'll talk about that in another cast. But this trip, so my sister owns a travel agency and suggested we do a trip to the Galapagos. And I was like, that sounds great, but we should also do mainland Ecuador because it's like hectare per hectare, the most biodiverse country on earth. And, you go to, there's like 1,600 species of bird on mainland Ecuador. You go to Galapagos, there's like 60 some. And yes, I understand the experiences. And we were there and they're warranted.
Yes.
But I had just as much fun on the mainland as I did on the Galapagos.
Yes, you did.
So let's talk a little bit about our trip. We went, we joined the Galapagos with G Adventures.
Yes, we did.
But we went with her just on our own to the Maquipucuna Reserve near Mindo, Ecuador, and that was just with us and two other friends.
That's right. Yeah. So this was all Tony's idea. We were approached about leading a tour in the Galapagos. I think the theory being that Tony is part of a very robust network of birders here in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. The Delaware Valley Ornithological Club is the oldest in the nation. Is that true?
Oldest continuous.
Okay.
There was a club started before, and then they took like
decades off and then started. So this is like,
Okay.
This is 1890.
Yeah, and Tony's been highly involved in that club for what, a decade?
15 years.
15 years, holy cow. And so, the thinking was, let's take a bunch of birders and go to the Galapagos. And as Tony mentioned, he said, okay, fine, but we cannot just stop over in Ecuador. We have to spend a couple days. And we were really lucky. We found some friends who wanted to go with us. And, Tony's pretty dialed into the nature community. And so he already had an idea in mind for where we should go while we were in Ecuador.
Yes, and to pay tribute to a wonderful man who's no longer with us, another one, Bill Thompson III, who had the beautiful idea of having the American Birding Expo. And even though he's from Ohio, he thought Philadelphia would be the perfect location, which it is because it's essentially located on the East Coast where
All those people.
about a third of the country lives within a couple hour drive of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. So I met Bill a few times before that, but I went to the expo. I was actually speaker at it one time and met a few people there, including some folks from this reserve in Ecuador and Isabella and particularly. And I was like, this really sounds wonderful, but particularly the allure for me was the mission of the place was great, but also the fact that it's the greatest place to see spectacled bear, also known as Andean bear.
That's right.
And one of my goals is to see every species of bear in the world. There's 8. Yes. This trip brought me to 5. So I'm past the halfway point, although the last 3 are like the hardest probably to see. And so
it's called Maquipucuna.
Maquipucuna.
You guys, it took me like 6 months, but I got it now. Listen, Maquipucuna. Yes, it was a wonderful, wonderful place. And can you talk a little bit about the Cloudforest and what that is in the Andes?
Yes. So this is on the western slope of the Andes. They also call this region in Ecuador the Chaco. And it's full of endemic species. And this is high elevation rainforest. It's so moist that, so they call it Cloudforest because the trees are often inundated by, actually clouds. The tops of these mountains are actually in the clouds, and it's even higher rainfall. And it's cooler. It's you're often wearing long pants and a jacket, even in the middle of the day there. Mm-hmm. It's, you're not going, you're still below tree line, and some of these mountains don't even have, they're the Andes, they don't even get snow cap, although some of them do. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's just lush, and everything's covered in epiphytes. So the branches are covered in orchids and mosses and lichens and ferns and bromeliads. And it's just,
extremely lush.
Yeah, and comfortable.
Yeah, we had a wonderful time. Yeah.
So we flew we flew into Quito.
Yes.
And we got there in the evening, and then we drove to right by the airport. It's a lovely hotel, the EB Hotel.
Yes, Euro Building, the EB Hotel. Yeah. I wish we'd stayed longer. It was lovely. The breakfast was lovely, and we woke up in the morning to a beautiful surprise. Yeah,
we could see Cotopaxi, the beautiful snow-capped volcano.
Yeah, that was gorgeous.
And I would like to go there at some point.
Absolutely.
Next time.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. The food was great, and we got picked up in the morning, about 2-hour drive to Maquipucuna. Yeah. And took a little walk to a waterfall. I saw some motmots, some tanagers, and euphonias. Beautiful. Lots of hummingbirds. And then we started going on our guided tours. Yeah. And
so they had just a lovely setup there. It was beautiful. There was a variety of different accommodations. We stayed in a lovely room overlooking the river. Extremely peaceful. We have great food. Tony was he was crazy for the Ecuadorian cuisine. He loved it. Lovely people, and they had just a very flexible, workable schedule every day. There were 4 or 5 different birding and nature walks.
Yeah, so there's a birding walk at 6 a.m. Before breakfast, and you come back for breakfast. Uh-huh. Then there's a walk after breakfast, generally to see bears. Yeah. Then there's a walk after lunch, and then there is a night walk. A night walk. Yeah, so there's about 4 walks a day.
Yeah, it's lovely. And, we're up in the Cloudforest. So, sometimes we were walking in the rain. But it was always beautiful. And we always saw something every single walk.
Yeah.
And they have just, very extensive trails. It is the Andes. So, some of the trails are rather steep, rather vigorous. But why don't you just tell us about some of the birds that we saw there?
Yeah, I'm going to refer to my...
Yeah, because it was, we saw the bears, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the birds themselves were spectacular. And if we'd had some more expert birders with us, I think we would have seen, without a doubt, even more, certainly tanagers and smaller birds.
Yeah, because when you're, me being the only real serious birder, I want to stop and pick through the dicky birds, the LBJs, and it's not as exciting for other people. So if I was with, like-minded folks, we would have been, picking through the tarantulettes and, ant birds and whatnot.
Yeah.
But, regardless, we still saw quite a bit. So crescent guan, wattle guan, hummingbirds were white-necked Jacobin, white-whiskered hermit, tawny-billed hermit, sparkling violet ear, cricket-headed sun angel, spectacled hummingbird, violet-tailed swift, black-tailed train bearer, browning cacao.
Are those all hummingbirds?
Yeah, fawn-breasted brilliant, green-crowned brilliant, crowned wood nymph.
We saw, when we went to go see them.
Yeah,
mountain toucan. Yeah,
and just collared trogon, rufous motmot, broad-billed motmot, white-whiskered puffbird, red-headed barbet. Just crimson-rumped toucanant, collared arasari, choco toucan. And that was different foliage gleaners and wood creepers. It was a spectacular event, and so they hire these guides from the local community to be bear spotters.
They do.
So when you go on your walk, you might not even actually be on a bear walk. You'd be on a bird walk or whatever, and they'll get a call on their cell phone if they have signal. Yeah. And be like, bear spot it, and then you run up and you get to see the bear. And we got to see spectacle bear twice.
Yeah. And so we timed the trip, I think, and one of the reasons we went to Maquipucuna is that the Andean bear isn't in this part of Ecuador year-round. They're attracted because of the bromeliads, correct? The tiny...
Well, that's what the bromeliads are throughout the range, one of their main foods. But in this case, it was wild avocados.
Okay.
And
I thought they were the same. I thought wild avocados.
No, bromeliads are pineapples.
I always thought it was weird that an avocado was considered a bromeliad, but okay, I'm with you. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about the wild avocados? And so they're climbing up into the trees that's why they were there, right?
Right.
You're looking at me like I'm crazy. I know they were there to eat the avocados.
So the avocados are in fruit, and the bears come, obviously bears can't travel that far, but they travel probably dozens of miles or whatnot, or come down from the highlands to feed on these avocados, and they're up in the trees eating avocados, and it's amazing. And the avocados there are about the size of olives.
Mm-hmm. Big olives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so at night we had this phenomenon that I was not anticipating. Mm-hmm. So we go on a walk, and the forest is just filled with oilbirds. And oilbirds are strange, I think, distantly related to nightjars. They kind of look like an owl mixed with a nighthawk, and they actually they eat oily fruits, and they pick them in the air. They don't actually land on the branches; they actually pick them while flying. And so everywhere we looked, we would see oilbirds flying around at night. Silhouetted by the moon. You could hear them everywhere. And normally when you see oilbirds, you have to go someplace where there's a cave where they live, or like a crevice, and you see them flying in and out at night, or you actually see them in the caves. And you rarely encounter them feeding, but so the same reason the bears were there, the oilbirds were there at night, and it was amazing. It was something I did not expect to see. Yeah. But I think my guess is anytime the fruit is in season, the oilbirds will be there. So that was remarkable.
Yeah. So as an avid birder, there's a lot that's not really that exciting to you because you've seen a lot of stuff, but you were super stoked about the oilbirds. Do you think you were just excited because it was unexpected, or is it kind of a pain in the ass to see them otherwise?
Yeah, kind of a pain in the ass to see them unless unless you your birding area happens to be near a lodge. I mean your lodge or whatever, it happens to be a cave that's that's accessible.
Yeah.
It's a bird that like, you often most likely won't see.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And then, the list of birds that you gave us before, like what, can you talk a little bit like why that was cool or why that's unique or?
Well, I mean, there's birds that only live there, like guyaquil, woodpecker, choco, toucan. Although we didn't see the long wattled umbrella bird, although people went to a different spot nearby and saw them when we were there.
The long wattled umbrella bird.
Yeah, which is a choco specialty. We didn't get to see that, but other people got to see them. This area is unique.
Yeah.
But the whole overall region is extremely biodiverse, and so the diversity, it's a hot spot for bird avian diversity in the world. Yeah. So there's just tons of species, and everywhere you look, there's something to see. And what I like about Cloudforest too is, unlike lowland rainforest, you can go almost any time of the day and see bird activity,
as opposed to dawn and dusk. Yeah,
if you're in lowland rainforest, you got to get up before dawn, get out in the field. And then you're taking a nap at midday and then go back out again. You can see birds any time of the day because it's just cooler and not as, there's more there's activity throughout the day. It's like, here when it's, even, like a cloudy overcast day tends to have more birds throughout the day than, the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the morning, a lot of times you really have to get up, and if it's going to be a warm day, you really got to get up and see everything at dawn. So this, you still see more at dawn, but it's not, you can see, there's activity throughout the day there, and it's lovely.
It is. I mean, I remember, I think it was our first walk. We got there and it was misting, and then it was straight up raining, pretty much a downpour as we're walking up through the mountains, and we're looking for birds, and there's not that much to see because it's raining. But then do you remember we started hearing the call of the guan?
Yeah.
And can you impersonate the guan for us?
It was like, yeah.
And then they were calling back and forth.
Yeah.
Like there were two of them. And we just kept like following the call and hearing the call. And then we finally we got to a clearing.
Yeah.
And we looked out over this beautiful view. And was it you that spotted the guan walking along?
It was me, yes. Tell
me about that.
Yeah, we finally got to see the wild guan walking along the branch there.
Yeah, it was like pretty far away, and it's a large bird. To me, it looked like a turkey. Almost.
Yeah, they're not quite as big. They're chicken size, I'd say.
Okay, chicken size. Wow.
Good sized bird. Looks a lot like a turkey. Distantly related, though. And then we also saw crescent guan as well on that trip.
Yeah, it was lovely. And as someone who's kind of new to being out in this kind of nature, that felt very David Attenborough to me.
Yeah.
Like I hear the bird, we're following its call, and then we found it. And that was, made the walk in the rain worth it to me.
Indeed.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about our excursion?
Yes. So, there's a legendary place. I should have wrote this down. It's Angel Paz's place, his private reserve, but it's like Refugio de la Aves, Angel Paz,
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
And so Angel Paz is this man who is a farmer, a raspberry farmer, and he developed a technique for habituating ant pittas to being hand-fed worms.
Yes. And it is the Refugio Paz de las Aves, the most successful family entrepreneurship in Northwest Ecuador. It's what it says on their website. So please continue. The story is amazing.
So apparently he was, story I heard, he was cutting a trail to a blind to see an Andean Cock-of-the-Rock lek. Mm-hmm. And so I want to see Andean Cock-of-the-Rock really bad. So anyway, but what he was doing, he saw an ant pitta and learned to gain his trust, and now we saw 5 species of ant pitta when we were there.
We did, yeah.
And as well as a wood quail, which is also very hard to see, cryptic forest species.
Yeah.
And so it was spectacular to see, to see him actually do that. And there was feeding stations all over the area for, toucans and hummingbirds. The food was phenomenal. The people were great. We got to meet his son, Vincenzo. Was it Vincenzo? Yeah. It was lovely people, lovely experience.
And it felt very hardcore to me as somebody who's new to birding, because we needed. So the goal was we were going to go see these ant pitas, but we also wanted to go see the Cock-of-the-Rock lek, which Tony was like, this is like, you know, a truly epic experience. And so we got up at 4, which is early for me, and got in the car and drove, I don't know how far it was, an hour or so. And we get there, I hear, you know, there's like a lot of squawking going on. Right,
Yeah.
Dave? And it was all, it was the lek, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it wasn't quite, I mean, it was a good experience, but I think Angie was expecting to see them more displaying like closer.
It really hyped it up for me.
Yeah.
It was nice. It's just, as I understand it, there were no, do you want to explain what a lek is?
So a lek is a communal display area where male birds will display in a group for a female bird.
That's right. And I think the issue that particular morning was there were no ladies around.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So they were, I don't think we saw an official display. We just saw a lot of Cock-of-the-Rocks.
Yeah.
Men. And they're beautiful, if you can describe them a little bit to me.
Yeah, they're like blood orange.
Yeah.
And they have like these white, like pearlescent white secondaries, that patches on their wings, and they have a mohawk, a crest that actually covers their bill. You can't even see their bill. So the crest starts at the bill and goes to the back of the head, and they're just, you know, spectacular looking birds. You know?
Yeah.
And their feathers kind of like come down to their feet, so they kind of have like funny looking feet.
Yeah.
They're really, really cool looking birds.
Yeah, they are. And so we hung out. We started our day with the Cock-of-the-Rocks, and then went to see the Ampitas, and I'll have Tony talk a little bit more about
the speed. Yeah, so we saw giant antpitta, mustached, chestnut crowned, yellow breasted, and ochre breasted. So that was a real treat.
Yeah, and I just I want Tone to talk a little bit about why that's so cool for birders to see this particular bird, and like how incredible it is. I mean, this man, the passion that he has, he spent, you know, decades of his life patiently working every day with these individual birds. It's not like, you know, he learned how to like work with a whole species. He literally names them. They're like Chiquita, Maria. Each bird, you know, is a very special relationship.
Yeah, and the other dark-backed wood quail was these like forest floor, cryptically colored, secretive species, you know, cryptic species it's very hard to see them. Even by playing tapes and calling, it's often, you won't see them. And
because they're so camoed, right?
Yeah,
it's
this
so
is my
dark and dense down there.
5th time to a place where I could have seen an antpitta. And I've heard them before. It was the first time I ever saw one, and I saw 5 in a day. Mm-hmm. So it's you know, pretty remarkable. And people have come and learned his technique. They come and he teaches them.
That's right.
And so he's spread this to other reserves in Ecuador and to Peru, and I think even folks from Asia have come over and learned
for the pittas,
for the pittas, yeah, which are, you know, and which I have seen too on my own. Without this technique, I've seen, you know, Northern Australia. I got to see the Papuan and the noisy pitta.
Yeah.
And they're maddening because their noisy pitta is noisy.
You can't find it.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, has like iridescent patches of like green and blue and red, and you still manage not to be able to see the thing.
Yeah, that's incredible. So yeah, it's a real gift that Angel Paws has given to the birding community. Yeah,
indeed. And one of the birds I wanted to see most in the trip was plate-billed mountain toucan.
That's right.
And unfortunately, they are a high elevation bird, and even though we're up in the mountains, they like to be even higher than we were. And they occasionally come to Angel Paws, but they did not come when we were there. And they are at Maquipucuna, but Maquipucuna is a pretty big area, and we didn't get up high enough where they were.
It would have been a long hike.
Yeah.
There was no guide who was particularly psyched to take us that far up. But we really lucked out because we were near a wonderful place. We just found out because of the local guides, bringing it back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast. So I'll let Tone tell you about where we went.
Yes, we went to Birdwatcher's House and Lodge.
Yes.
At Santa Rosa of Mindo, Ecuador. So Mindo is like a whole area, right? It's I think there actually is a city called Mindo, but
I think so too.
But like Maquipucuna is called Mindo, Angel Paws is called Mindo, and this place is called Mindo. So it's like
Yeah, but the cool thing was, so whenever, so we went up to Santa Rosa. And I mean, we're high up, we're driving along the ridge of a mountain and sort of wondering, I'm increasingly wondering, like, do we know where we're going? And then suddenly there we were at this lovely little bird watcher's haven where the plate-billed mountain toucan is reliably seen. And we were there in the middle of the day, weren't we, Bill?
We were, yes. And it wasn't there right away, but
I think we saw it. Did we hear it call as soon as we got out of the car? We saw it fly. Like, we heard the call. Remember when we got out of the van?
We thought we might have. We weren't quite sure. We heard a toucan call. We're not particularly familiar with this species, but we got there and they said it had just been there.
Mm.
And
okay, I had some sort of sense. Yeah.
And there's this it kind of looks like a shade house for plants where if you've ever been it's not really a greenhouse, but it has fine kind of netting that makes it shadier for shade tolerant plants. Yeah. It looked like that. And there's lots of flowering plants, but lots of hummingbird feeders. And there was at least a dozen species of hummingbird, of dozens and dozens and dozens of individuals.
Yeah, it was just miraculous. We got there and they had just created just a haven for hummingbirds. I mean, Tony's mother loves hummingbirds, and I was taking as many videos as I could to send back to her in Philly. Just that alone was miraculous, and we were all, just really happy to see the variety of species.
There's also mass flower piercers, which is a little tanager, has a hook at the tip of the bill because it actually will rip into the corolla of a flower and get the nectar that way. Wow. So rather than just drinking nectar like a hummingbird, that was remarkable. And I would love to actually, I don't know how often you want to switch your lodges, but I wouldn't mind staying in Maquipucuna, staying there, Tony and I have talked about this a little bit. I think after our trip, just sort of our inaugural journey, we can put together a really wonderful tour for birders, because you can stay at Angel Paz's refuge, and you can stay up at this international bird washer's house in Santa Rosa, and you can stay at Maquipucuna, and I think it's just it's other lodges as well, although some of them I think are quite expensive. There's one down in Mindo is really expensive.
Yeah, I'm sure, but I don't think these are. Yeah. It's definitely more of a rustic experience. But do you remember seeing the plate-billed mountain toucan? Did it fly across and land?
We saw it fly and land, and it was on the banana feeder, and it was, they're just spectacular. They're unbelievable.
Yeah. We got some really good shots, and they have everything all set up there to attract the mountain toucan. So that was were you pretty stoked?
I was, and it's hard to find words because the main body of the bird is blue, but it's just grayish kind of it's this blue color that it's hard to describe. I mean, it's this almost cloudy, kind of milky blue with a bit of iridescence to it. I mean, it's it's like a cloudy sky that's still kind of blue. It's still pretty blue. You know what I mean? Like a dark blue, like a storm. Yeah. It looked like the aftermath of a thunderstorm in a bird.
Yeah. And very colorful. It has red and yellow patches. I mean, it looks like it's out of a storybook.
Yeah. I mean, and it's one of the most spectacular birds.
Yeah. And
it's of a group of birds that are already spectacular, and it's a particularly spectacular representative of a spectacular group.
Absolutely. So. And you had, it was a wonderful day. The food was wonderful. The people were wonderful. We just had a good time. Can you just maybe wrap up by giving me your overall impressions? Tony loved Ecuador.
Yes. I want to talk about the food for a hot minute. So I'm a fan of, Latin American food in general. Yeah. And what I like about Ecuadorian cuisine, at least in the areas we were, it's a little bit hardier. And I think it makes sense. You're up in the mountains, a little bit more rugged, a little bit colder. Damp. There's stews and soups and polenta or cassava, kind of almost like samosas,
Yeah.
With chicken or kind of stew meat inside. It was absolutely delicious. Wonderful people. yeah, just a great, the culture, very friendly, very warm.
And we were left
Relaxed.
with the impression that there was so much more to see in Ecuador.
Right, because
it's unbelievably diverse for being such a relatively small country.
Right, yeah, and if you actually look at the distribution of a lot of bird species there, they're like in these bands along the mountains on one side or the other. So as you go down the mountain, right, the Andes.
Down in elevation, or
yeah, you go down in elevation. Or up and down in elevation. There's different like bands of birds, and they're often different from one side of the Andes to the other. Like, there's 3 species of mountain toucan, and one is on plate bills on the west side of the Andes, and there's 2 on the east side, but they're at different altitudes themselves. So I mean, it's just amazing.
And there's a whole rainforest component of Ecuador.
Yeah, there's there's Amazonian rainforest, lowland Amazonian rainforest.
Yeah, with a totally distinct culture, as I understand, an indigenous culture. And then Quito, we barely put our toes in the water. Just did a really basic cultural tour of the old city, but it was pretty phenomenal.
There's the Palermo, the above tree line. And then there's also an area on the border of Peru of endemic it's like lowland rainforest birds.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the coast.
Yeah, the coast itself.
The whale watching. It's incredible. And then, of course, in another episode, we're going to talk about the Galapagos.
Yes.
Which are their own specialty. Do you want to ask me what I liked most?
Yeah. So, what resonated with you, my dear?
For me, I just like getting out in nature and unplugging. One of the people we were with really likes being plugged into technology, and I can understand why her husband wasn't able to join her for the trip, and so connectivity was really important to her, and possibly because I'm with the love of my life on this journey. I loved that we weren't very dialed in. I love being in a place where nature is dominating over technology. And just, for me, I enjoy the birds. I appreciate them. I don't have an eBird list. I get excited when there's a live bird. I like learning about them, but really I just want to be out there. And the Cloudforest is beautiful and inspirational. I mean, it's exactly what you'd think. There's clouds, hanging on the horizon, and it's so lush and beautiful. So I just liked getting out there with my hubby. It was really nice. Yeah.
Great. Are we going to move on to the episode 2 or talk about the Galapagos now? Or do you want to wait? Yeah. So, so like us on your podcasting software of choice.
Yeah.
And, or like this video, because this will probably also be on YouTube, but just,
yeah. All the platforms.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll come back to talk to you guys about the Galapagos soon, and we'll have Kim on soon. And this is just On the Wing Tours is just one of the podcasts that's launching under the Wildlife Observer Network. Tony has a grand vision, and it's going very well. So do you want to just real quick, as we're wrapping up, let people know some of the other podcasts? And
so in addition to On the Wing podcast, we have Brothers in Birding, which is me and Tai Key, kind of just riffing on birding community.
Love it.
Bouncers to Birders, which is my other friend Mike. We literally used to be bouncers, and now we're both birders.
Fabulous.
There's Onward for Wildlife, which is a wildlife conservation policy discussion cast. Mm-hmm. There is Nature's Hype Man, which is just me and Robin Irizarry just talking about different wildlife. We'll talk about birds, but mostly a lot of other things, because a lot of this is going to be birding heavy.
Yeah.
And there's a sci-fi and fantasy podcast where we discuss wildlife and biology of sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah.
And there is a herpetology podcast as well.
There is?
Yeah,
That new to me,
Billy and Mike.
Holy Toledo. Herping ain't easy.
Exactly. And then, of course, the one that started all, the Urban Wildlife Podcast.
Dun, 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 dun. That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening to our inaugural podcast, everybody. And